Lunala is a Pokemon that has received a bunch of mixed reviews since Regulation G was announced. This past weekend, I managed to get top 4 in an online tournament with about 70 players with this Lunala team that you see on the screen. Of course, we will get into that, my thoughts on Lunala and the team itself in just a minute. But first off, just a quick reminder that I do leave the full tournaments in the description down below for you guys, so you can always go down there, click on that, and see what else is doing well in the tournament. Don't have to just stick with this one Lunala team. The other successful teams are down there in that link as well. So just make sure you check that out if you're looking to get in to see what's doing well in Regulation G so far. But more importantly, you guys are here for the Lunala team, so you know what? Let's talk about it now. Like I said before, Lunala is one of those Pokemon that is very mixed review right now. I personally love it. I think it's a very strong option in the format right now, but I don't think it's going to hold up as Regulation G develops, because what I'm finding when I'm team building Lunala, and I have 3 or 4 Lunala variants now, is I get the first like 4 or 5 Pokemon, and then everything that I want to put in the last slot just ends up being another restricted Pokemon, and I cannot have that right now. Now, does that make Lunala bad? Absolutely not. I just think it really, really appreciates having a second restricted somewhere in the builder, which unfortunately we can't have in Regulation G. But I do still think it's a strong mon. It's got some really strong matchups right now, especially into the likes of Calyrex Shadow. Calyrex Ice, my bad. Calyrex Ice, it's kind of neutral into Calyrex Shadow because you do have Wide Guard to shut the Astral Barrage down. But more importantly, into the Calyrex Ice right now, you have Wide Guard to shut down its Glacial Lance, and more often than not, they're either running Stomping Tantrum or Close Combat. If they're running Close Combat, you're gaming. If they're running Stomping Tantrum or High Horsepower, it still doesn't really hurt you. It is High Horsepower, by the way, not Stomping Tantrum. But if they're running High Horsepower, it doesn't really hurt you. You have an busted ability in Shadow Shield, meaning when you're at full HP, damage coming into you is cut in half, which is incredibly strong, and that'll explain some of the EVs I have on the team in a bit. But once again, I would love to fit a Psychic move here. I just don't think I can. The ability to have a Trick Room setter that doesn't need a designated slot to be a Trick Room setter feels really strong in this format. There's a lot of teams that are just like, haha, we're going to go Burr, we're going to go Tailwind, we're going to go Astral Barrage, we're going to go Tailwind, we're going to go Water Spout, right? So having the ability to just set Trick Room feels really good. And you also don't need a lot to set Trick Room with Lunala, because 90% of the time, they have to double into you to kill it, because nothing is taking this out in one shot. You get 137 HP, 89 and 107 in defenses, and it's just incredibly strong, because you also get that ability that we talked about earlier in Shadow Shield, where that first hit into you is 50% off. It's incredible, right? Well, half off, I should say. Technically same thing, but you get the point, right? And you just are able to live attacks where they would normally be able to double a Trick Room setter, and they can no longer take you out. Obviously, there's limits to this, right? But Lunala is very strong in getting that Trick Room up. And I think without Wide Guard, there's no reason to run Lunala in this format. You matchup check a lot of Pokemon, especially a lot of the restricteds, like a Groudon. If Groudon is running Fire Punch, Swords Dance, Precipice Blades, it's locked in to never clicking Precipice Blades as long as Lunala's on the field, as long as you're winning those mind games. Now, granted, it does create mind games, like, oh, I just clicked Wide Guard. Am I going to click Wide Guard again? So are you playing a little bit of mind gamey territory here? Absolutely. But I think it's too good to not have. I think you need it. I played like 2 or 3 Calyrex Shadow, and they were Astral Barrage, Expanding Force. I actually played one that was actually Snarl and Protect as well. And I'm like, I just click Wide Guard, and like if they have Calyrex on the field, it's a liability to them, right? So I think Wide Guard is too good to not have right now. Now, do I think that Calyrex Shadow spread was optimal? No, I don't. But I do think you're going to see the likes of Astral Barrage, you're going to see Glacial Lance, you're going to see Water Spout, Origin Pulse, Precipice Blades. The list goes on, guys, of just big spread moves from the restricted Pokemon. I think Lunala matches up really well into them. Calyrex Ice is nice. Calyrex Shadow probably is neutral just because of how well you support the rest of your team. You also have the likes of Groudon, which I think you match up really well into. Right, so already those are 3 of the big restricteds right now that I think you have very good matchups into, or at least good enough matchups to justify bringing Lunala, where you'd want a Lunala in that matchup. Now, it's a little bit of a matchup fish, because there are matchups where you kind of feel like, wow, I don't really need Lunala here, but it's still really strong. Once again, since I'm rambling now, but Moongeist Beam, broken move, 100 ghost type move, ignores abilities of other Pokemon. So this was actually really important back in the day when you'd go through like the Mimikyu disguise. Doesn't really exist anymore, not really playing Mimikyu. I haven't run into too much that Moongeist Beam is really going to ignore in this format, but it's still a really nice secondary effect of the move, and it's just the strongest move you got anyways. You might as well use it. Meteor Beam feels like a must on Lunala. Regular Lunala, scary. +1 Lunala, incredibly, incredibly scary. So you're not so much using Meteor Beam for a make sure I have an answer to instant. Well, yes, you are using it for that, but you're also using it because once you just get the +1, you become that much more of a threat, which just feels incredible to me, right? Being able to get that extra punch added to your moves is incredible. Then you also get the added bonus of, well, Incineroar is no more. So that's always fun as well, right? You just bring this in late game, they have an Incineroar, you blow up the Incin, right? So it feels really, really strong there as well, right? But that secondary effect of just getting that special attack boost for the rest of your Moongeist Beams feels incredibly, incredibly strong right now. Once again, Trick Room Wide Guard, we've talked about. Terra Fairy, there's a few options here. I like Terra Fairy. I think it flips the type chart perfectly for you, very similar to the Calyrex Shadow, right? Because we do have the same typing. I think Fairy is the best defensive typing on this piece, and I think on Lunala you'd want a defensive typing. I've seen a couple people go normal to really flip the type chart so that the ghost move just doesn't hit you at all, which is very valid. I think Terra Normal is something that you're going to see in this format on certain Pokemon. I don't know if it's going to stick around on Lunala. I think Lunala really appreciates having Terra Fairy. I do think Fairy is just one of the more optimal ones for it, especially with the likes of Dark Urshifu. You're going to get hit by knockoffs. They're going to try and hit you with Dark type, so why not just resist that, right? But there's options there. I think Fairy is optimal in my opinion. And we'll go quickly over the spread, guys, because you might look at this and go, huh, right? But basically, I am abusing Shadow Shield in this team. This is what I said I was going to do when I built Lunala, because I think having a restricted stick around on the field, especially it being Lunala, being able to maybe get another wide guard up when they're not expecting me to, and just like I said, being able to get that Trick Room up, having that bulk is really, really strong. What I made calc that I wanted to look at was making sure +1 Moongeist Beam removed Calyrex Ice Rider, and that is what 100 plus is for. That basically, if we're at +1, Calyrex Ice Rider, that's 252 HP, will always fall to the Moongeist Beam, which feels incredibly strong. Then, of course, I wanted two things. I wanted to have a matchup to a spot where I did not need to set Wide Guard versus a Calyrex. Because if I'm always having to click Wide Guard versus Calyrex, I never get the chance to hit it back, and that felt bad. If I can at least save this to a 1v1 where I have Lunala versus Calyrex, or a 2v1 where I have Lunala, I no longer need to click Wide Guard because I can now live an Astral Barrage because of my Shadow Shield. I can just I can afford to maybe not have to lean into the mind game as much and just click Moongeist Beam. So that's what the special defense is for, excuse me. And then defense, I said, you know what can I do here? What can I do with Shadow Shield that no one would ever expect me to be able to do? And that is, right now, 92-228 lives Adamant Wicked Blow from a Dark Urshifu. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Unfortunately, it hasn't really come up too much, but just having the generalized bulk is really, really nice as well, because there's games where they just think they're going to kill you. They send a double up and they just can't, right? You're living on like 10 to 15%. And then I've seen a lot of games where I've had Pokemon players go and they're like, wow, you live that? And I'm like, yeah, I'm a Lunala, right? Like this stat line is ridiculous, and I just really play into the Shadow Shield with this. It's a really, really cool spread. Now, I don't know if it's optimal by any means, but once again, early format, I like hitting calcs that I can see coming in handy. And those were the three that I really, really wanted to pinpoint on this spread. Then again, just toss the last four into speed, right? It doesn't matter where it goes. Yes, I'm setting Trick Room, but that should still be slower than a good chunk of things, and I'm faster than most Rillabooms as well outside of Room, which felt really good. Either way, Lunala, very, very strong Pokemon. We're going to go Kingambit now, and I opted for the Assault Vest Kingambit. I think if you are going to play Kingambit in this format, at least right now, you want an Assault Vest, because where I see Kingambit being used needs an Assault Vest. It just appreciates Assault Vest so much more. You tank hits from the Calyrex Shadow Rider. You tank hits from opposing Lunalas, right? You sit in front of the Calyrex Ice Rider for the most part. Yes, they do run high horsepower, but you live one, so it's not really too big of a deal. You can hit them back. Ursaluna Blood Moon tends to be paired with Calyrex Ice Rider right now. You live some of those hits as well. That actually came up a couple times in the tournament. But, right, I just really appreciate having the Kingambit with an Assault Vest here. It just allows me to bring it to certain games. The way the team is functioning, where I'm bringing Lunala, Gambit, Incin, Rillaboom to 90% of my matches, which is probably not the way this team is supposed to run, right? But I am doing that 90% of my matches probably, right? Where I really appreciate having the AV. I really went on the defensive core here. You could probably easily go something like Safety Goggles Swords Dance here, and that would actually be pretty heat. I might actually consider that moving forward, but the Safety Goggles is on the instant, so it's a little weird, right? It's just tough because of Pokemon that you're trying to bring versus the Calorexes. You don't really want to have a berry on, so like that doesn't really leave me with too much else for Incin. So Incin probably wants those goggles still, right? And then you could put like Citrus Berry here, but then once again, if I'm trying to bring this versus the Calorexes, Citrus Berry just doesn't make sense, right? You could just go normal with like a Black Glasses set as well, boost that damage, but I don't think it's a requirement right now in this format. I think bulky is EV is the way to go, in my opinion, on Kingambit, but you can easily throw it onto Rillaboom and find something else for Kingambit. But besides the point, the synergy between Kingambit and Lunala is absolutely incredible, right? You're weak to the fighting moves. You still have the switch in Lunala. Lunala doesn't like to see Ghost. Lunala doesn't like to see Dark. Kingambit eats both of those and actually hits the Ghost back as well. The synergy here is really, really strong. Feels incredible when you're playing the team as well. These are the two. This is what the team started as. It's called Moon King for a reason, right? And it just kills. You know, these two function really, really well. I have debated going over low kick with a Terra Blast just to actually punish some things back with the Terra Fairy, because there are times, a lot of times, where I just don't have anything to do. Low kick in a restricted format is generally pretty good, but Terra Fairy would actually pressure Koraidon and maybe force it to Terra, because I do have issues with Koraidon with this team. There's not a lot that I can realistically do to it. Obviously, Lunala is very nice. I can get Trick Room up versus it as well. But outside of Lunala, I can't really do much to it. So maybe having a Terra Blast, Terra Fairy could be good here, especially if they are opting to have a Koraidon on their team. Right, so that's something to look into if you guys are going to try to pick up the team. Once again, the spread is nothing crazy, guys. 252.44, that makes Life Orb, Calyrex, Shadow a guaranteed 5-hit into you, which feels really, really good. Once again, just hit the bump and attack. Didn't really need speed, so just 4 to fix the leftovers. And then 12, this gave me some better rolls into some of like the high horsepowers going around. Living Precipice Blades as well is always really nice. Not that the 12 did anything for that. You live Precipice Blades regardless. But once again, that's the Kingambit, guys. Once again, standard AV Kingambit. There's nothing really to say here. You can play around with probably your own AV Kingambit spread. I just like getting that 5-hit knockout from the Life Orb Calyrex Shadow. It just felt really good to me. Next two Pokemon, guys. Once again, just going to go over really, really quickly. It is an Incineroar and a Rillaboom. They've been here since the beginning, guys. There's nothing else to say on Incin and Rillaboom. At this point, we know all about Fake Out. We know all about Knockoff, Flare Blitz, Parting Shot. We know about the Incin set. I keep Terra Ghost. And once again, I said this in the Groudon team. I'm going to say it again with the Incin team. Terra Ghost still just feels good. I'm bringing Incineroar to Calyrex Shadow matchups. Not as a Calyrex Shadow matchup. If I am Terra Ghosting in that matchup, or Terraing in that matchup, I am no longer keeping it as my answer to that piece. So I don't care that it's going to switch to a Ghost type that's weak to Calyrex Shadow, right? Because if I'm Terraing in that matchup, I'm saying I no longer need Incin to deal with the Calyrex. And if I need Incin to deal with Calyrex, I'm just not going to Terra it. So I don't mind Terra Ghost here. There are other options, of course, like Terra Fairy, maybe Terra Grass as well, and then drop the Safety Goggles. But I don't love Terra Grass, because then if I Terra Grass, then I just weak to Calyrex Ice Rider, right? There's trade-offs to both, but I like Ghost. Ghost has been the most consistent for me so far in this format. It's felt pretty good. Once again, though, nothing crazy here. This is enough to live Precipice Blades from Groudon all the time, because it's spread. So I live the Precipice Blades consistently. Then I just said special defense, a little bit of speed, a little bit of attack. Nothing too crazy going on here. You can play around, maybe drop this to find a Calculike, raise the speed. Tons of opportunities here to play around with the Incin spread. But once again, just hit that one main calc, in my opinion, which is that survival of the Precipice Blades. And then after that, I just kind of went from there and said, you know what, here, just fill in the rest, right? But once again, it's an Incin, guys. There's not much to say here. Supports the team really, really well. Gives me access to Fake Out, Trick Room, if it's something I am looking for as well. Intimidates, just makes Lunala that much bulkier. It's really, really disgusting. Rillaboom hitting the field. Once again, nothing crazy, guys. Like I said, AV was on Kingambit. If I take AV off of Kingambit, you definitely must put it on Rillaboom. Rillaboom wants Assault Vest on this team. I just prefer Kingambit to have it as well. But if you want to play around with different items on Kingambit, by all means, throw the AV on Rillaboom. That's really all I'm going to say here. U-turn has been clutch. Getting around to cycle and reposition feels really, really good. Once again, just Grassy Glide, Woodhammer, Fake. Guys, it's a Rillaboom. Terrifier to resist the fairy stuff. To resist fire as well. It's a Rillaboom. There's nothing else to say, guys. You know, a little bit of speed, good chunk of attack because I'm a Miracle Seed variant. You know, optimal grassy terrain, HP, EVs, and then just dump it into bulk. There's nothing crazy here. It's a Rillaboom. Let's move on to the more ambiguous parts of the team now. And this is where I start thinking that I really want a second restricted. Because I really want a good water type. And this Urshifu feels so lackluster to me. Okay, every time I try to use Urshifu on this team and I try to bring it into games, it's done its job most of the time. It just feels like it could be a Kyogre. You know, like, once you have Kyogre in the format, using non-restricted water types just feels so lackluster. And Urshifu is falling into that category for me right now. Now, granted, I think Urshifu is still a really good Pokemon. It's never going to be bad by any means, right? But maybe I need a different set, right? I do have Incineroar and Rillaboom, so maybe I do go like a Choice Scarf Urshifu, right? But I want it to be able to abuse the fact that I'm probably going to be setting Trick Room up versus those faster teams, as opposed to trying to outrun those faster teams. I'm not going to outrun those faster teams with Incineroar, Rillaboom, Lunala. It's just not going to happen, right? Do I maybe go back over here and say screw Trick Room and go Tailwind? I mean, you definitely can, but I don't know. I just think those faster teams are going to have ways to... Whoops. As I just delete my entire Lunala. Why is Wide Guard showing illegal? Okay, there we go. But anyways, right? I think those faster teams are going to have ways to deal with teams that want to go faster than them already. So just being slow, they have a tougher time stopping the Trick Rooms as opposed to stopping a matching tail. If I'm just going to match Tailwind, I'm still going to be slower. So I might as well set that Trick Room, get the reversal up, right? So I kind of played into that with this Urshifu having a Mystic Water as well. I probably could go even bulkier right now on this Urshifu. I could 100% drop this speed quite a bit. Like, this speed stat was very, very ambiguous. I haven't really looked into it, but I think slowing it down and bulking this up could actually allow you to actually use it properly, right? But if I'm slowing down an Urshifu and bulking it up, that just sounds like I want a Kyogre. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like I want a Kyogre in this slot, and I can't have a Kyogre in this slot. But Urshifu has done the job. It's been pretty serviceable. Once again, guys, it's an Urshifu. There's not a lot to talk about here, but it does synergize pretty well with the team, right? You know, you don't like the fire types with the Kingambit and the Rillaboom, right? Instant can't really hit them back either. So Urshifu kind of comes in, closes that up. My biggest matchup issue right now is Ogerpon Fire, and that's definitely an issue. Both my Groudon team and this team for me have both been losing to Ogerpon Fire, and I really don't love seeing it all that much, right? So it's definitely something I would need to patch up if I do want to actually take this team to a more consistent level. But I do think the team overall is very, very strong. Like, the synergy between Lunala and Gambit feels good. I still want a Kyogre here, but Urshifu is going to be serviceable for now. And then Landorus, okay? Here's a Pokemon. I do not believe in Landorus in this format. It's cool. I think it's actually really, really good on probably a Kyogre Rain team where you can just kind of send Sansy or Storms. I think that's really, really strong. Now, my main concern is it just doesn't really do that much, right? You're dying to a lot of things. You do resist Groudon and do that pretty well for the most part, which is one of the main reasons I have it here. You hit Groudon pretty hard as well. I do hit those Ogerpons before they tear it as well. It's a piece that just made sense to put here. Play around with this piece, guys. Play around with the Urshifu, play around with the Landorus. You don't need them here. You can find other synergies that work probably better with this team, but this is what I came up with. I could not come up with anything else. I'm sure there's tons of other things, but some of them are like, oh, you need like a Tornadus here. Then you get like Tailwind, Urshifu, plus the other things, right? Torn makes a lot of sense here. I've seen a lot of talk about maybe like putting a Pelipper to reset, just to set weather and have stuff like that go for this team, which also feels pretty decent, right? There are options for this Landorus slot. Nothing really too crazy. You're not set on Lando. I don't love Lando in this format. I think you can maybe cycle it around, right? Maybe Pelipper over Urshifu and leave Lando and have Sand here, right? That's an option as well. But long story short, this once again 12-12 is for the Life Orb, Calyrex, Shadow Rider, just Astral Barrage. You're at least gonna live one. You're not doing much back to it, but a lot of the time with Calyrex, Shadow Rider, it's if you know you can live one, you can play your endgame too. Well, if I can chip it down a little bit, get to my endgame where it's Lando versus Calyrex, and I know I'm going to live a barrage, I'm gaming, right? It's just at the beginning of the format especially, knowing you're going to live those calcs feels really, really good, because then you see it and you're like, okay, and you can kind of base the rest of the calcs off of that, right? Oh, I lived the Life Orb one. If there's Specs, I'm probably dead. If there's Sash, I'm guaranteed to live, right? Whereas if I just say, oh, I lived the Sash Astral Barrage anyways, and then the Life Orb one comes in and you're like, do I live this or not? I don't know. I don't know. It feels good to have a little bit of bulk on Landorus. There's tons of leeway to play around with this. You could probably drop the special attack a little bit if you wanted to, but once again, I am not a believer in Landorus in this format. I don't think it's good without Rain or without ways to abuse Rain. Maybe it is good. Maybe I'm wrong. It's a very good Pokemon by all means. It is a good Pokemon. Don't get me wrong. I don't know. I feel it feels a little bit fake in this format, although it did put in a bunch of work into tournament this past weekend. But I also played a lot of Amoonguss where I was able to just get Substitute up and win. So, I don't know. Team feels really, really strong. I think the concept, like the Lunala, Kingambit, Incineroar, Rillaboom, those four, maybe with some item shuffling, is definitely feeling really, really good for what is going to be a Lunala team in this format. These are the four I'm very, very content with. Now, granted, you could drop Kingambit and maybe put an Urshifu Dark, and it works just the same. My concern with Urshifu Dark is then I'm walking around looking for a Steel type. And the problem is, if you guys go look at the Steel types in this format, there's not very many good Steel types that aren't a restricted Pokemon anymore, right? It just doesn't feel good. This is where maybe you drop Kingambit and you put a Zacian in here, right? And you have another, that's where the double restricted feels good, but you can't do that in Regulation Z, right? So I think Kingambit is the best Steel type I have, and I really wanted to utilize Kingambit on this team because I do think that synergy is very, very nice. But regardless, I think the team is really, really strong. Lunala has been a ton of fun. I think it's actually pretty good. Once again, you do kind of get to a spot where it maybe feels a little like matchup fishy, where if you get the wrong matchup, it hurts, but if you get the right matchup, you're gaming, right? Whereas like a second restricted would definitely help patch a lot of that. So is Lunala worth your single restricted? I think it's enough to have to respect. I think you have to respect Lunala in this format. I think it's a very strong Pokemon in this format. I just don't know if it's quite enough, but it feels pretty good. This team feels good. Curious to see how the team develops. I'm gonna stop rambling. I think I've said the same thing for like the past like 5 minutes now, so I am gonna stop rambling, guys. If you guys do enjoy this type of content, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel, and of course I really do appreciate it. But with that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in a future video.